All right, let's jump in. Gosh, it feels really scary to tell this story. I'm not sure why, because I've been telling the story to clients and friends and people who know me personally for ages, but I think to just have it out into the world feels a little bit vulnerable, and that's totally natural and normal. So what is the story and why now? The story is how, honestly, the crux of the story, there's so many different ways to tell the story, and the crux of this story that I want to tell today is this week on November 12th, I am celebrating 6 years without alcohol. And that has to do with psychedelics. So that's the story that I want to tell, because I came to psychedelics intentionally. I'd worked with psychedelics. I'd recreationally used psychedelics from childhood, but this time was different. And this was in 2018. So this story actually begins before 2018, as all good stories do, right? The lead up to the story, let's call it that. And so the lead up to the story was as follows. I think 2016 was the first year that I spent as a daily meditator. 2016 is also the year that me and a lot of my friends turned 30 years old. So there were a lot of parties happening. And because I was meditating daily, I was practicing what is called Vedic meditation, which is a subset of transcendental meditation. And it's a type of meditation where you meditate twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. And so it really brought me into the depths of my subconscious mind. I didn't know it at the time, but that's exactly what was happening. And it didn't take long of practicing this daily meditation twice a day, 20 minutes each time, to notice that I felt really different on Friday than I did on Monday, right? It didn't take long for me to realize what's the difference between a Friday and a Monday? And the difference is that I wasn't drinking alcohol very much during the week. Honestly, if at all. I've had a devoted yoga practice for a long time. I had an active social life that did not revolve around alcohol. So at that time, it was really the weekends where I drank a lot of alcohol. And so I was like, oh crap, like I'm spending this whole week, right? Monday through Friday, building my mental health, building my stamina, to deepen my mental health, to deepen my, just like my relationship with myself and all of these things. And then I flip the table and just like mess it all up on the weekends. And so I had that realization in 2016. And the reason I mentioned that it was when a lot of my friends and I turned 30 is because it also became this outlet of really big party weekends. A lot of my friends and I had like really big parties. We threw really extravagant parties, and there was a lot of alcohol at those parties, including my 30th birthday party. Shout out to anyone who traveled to South Brooklyn with me to revisit my childhood Russian home of South Brooklyn and to drink shots of vodka, and the fun that we had in that experience. I wouldn't change it for the world. But what was also happening was I was noticing like, crap, like alcohol really messes with my mental health. And I have this whole life, my yoga practice, my meditation practice, my spiritual practices, everything is built to help me with my mental health, because from a really young age, my mental health has been pretty precarious. And so I started playing this game in 2016 where I was like, oh, is this date worth my mental health? Is this party worth my mental health? Is this wedding worth my mental health? And it became this judgment call of, okay, am I going to drink or am I not going to drink? Is this going to be worth it or not? And so with the big blowout bashes for 30th birthdays, heck yeah, drank every time. And then I got this data set of like, okay, when I do drink that intensely, it takes me anywhere from 3 to 20 days to recover. And at the time, what did recovery mean? It meant like getting back to, well-being, right? A lot of times after drinking alcohol, I would slip into depressive holes. I'm prone to depressive holes. And so intentionally or willingly going into depressive holes meant that I didn't always know how long they were going to last. And gosh, I just started playing all these games of, oh, is this worth it? Is that worth it? I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. And it became a little exhausting. Honestly, the mental load that I carried of every single drink feeling so high stakes because, if I have one drink, am I going to have two? If I have two, am I going to have three? If I have three, am I going to have four? If I have four, is that going to cause a depressive hole? So it just became a really high mental load. It became stressful, and I started praying for change. I started praying for a life that didn't revolve around alcohol. I started feeling like it was out of control. Like I was doing something that I didn't fully consent to. And again, at the time, I was a corporate executive. I was living in New York City, high drinking culture there, love it to death. And it makes it harder when it doesn't feel like there are a ton of other options. Again, I did have community that was centered around non-drinking events, but even that had, it wasn't my full-time community. So, and especially dating in New York City revolved around alcohol. And that's all good. And again, there was no rock bottom moment for me with alcohol. I didn't have an issue with it. The issue that I had with it was that I was noticing that it wasn't so great for my mental health, and I wanted to prioritize my mental health. And, maybe you've had this experience too, where it's just like this one thing that you want to change that you think, okay, if I just, if I'm better about laundry, if I'm better about putting gas in my car before I hit empty, if I'm better about something that feels so minute that it will have a positive impact in my life. And I'm curious what that'll be, but also it feels like this big hurdle to jump over. And that's what alcohol was for me. It felt like a giant hurdle to jump over. And I honestly wasn't sure if I could do it. I wasn't sure if I could distance myself from it long term. I would go a week without it, 2 weeks without it. The longest I had done was 30 days. And it felt amazing. Oh my gosh, to take that mental load off, to have this permission slip of I'm not drinking because I'm, doing a cleanse or diet or whatever. It felt incredible to have that freedom of I'm not drinking, and that is fine. And so nonetheless, I would come back to it all the time until I didn't, which was the story of 2018, which is the story that I'm here to tell now. So the medicine that I sat with includes what is called a dieta. And a dieta is a diet. And so you cleanse your system from certain things, including alcohol. And so I started my dieta for this intentional psychedelic ceremony in 2018. I started the dieta on November 12th. 2 weeks before the ceremony. And I remember having my last drink. I remember going out, and I remember not really thinking much of it, thinking I would get right back to it. I remember going out to a bar, having a lot of wine and a lot of vodka. I was in Spain at the time. So wine, obviously a big part of Spanish culture. Vodka is a part of my Russian culture. And so I was drinking a lot that night and didn't even think twice about it. Honestly, thought I'd be back in 2 weeks. No worries. And then I go to sit with the medicine, and there was no preparation, which is why I do this work now. There was no integration. There was like very little advice, very little knowledge. The shaman that I worked with for the medicine ceremony were indigenous shaman. And so it's just different in native cultures. They don't have the same, they call them Western diseases. They don't have the same Western diseases that we have in the West, which means that they don't really prioritize preparation and integration the way that I think really serves our Western minds that are less trusting, more scientific, and just need something different than they do, which makes sense. We're coming from different cultures. So I went into the ceremony thinking that everything was I was praying for change for 2 years, but I still wasn't quite sure that I wasn't prepared for the change. I couldn't have at the time wrapped my mind around what happened. And so what happened was I went into the ceremony. There was 3 nights in a row. The first night was not much happened, which is really common for plant medicines, that, plant medicines come with plant intelligence. And so a lot of times the plant medicine is scanning your system. If you're new to working with plant medicine, I was new to this medicine, and it was just scanning my system that first night. And I just thought it was like pretty chill, pretty casual. Honestly, looking back on it, I was really arrogant, which is also why I do this work, because I had my spiritual ass handed to me. And that was night two. Night two, the medicine took me to a really dark place, and it started showing me things that I was not ready to look at, that I was not willing to look at in the way that it was showing it to me. And I went to war, which even at the time felt ridiculous, to go to war with this plant medicine. Basically, the medicine said, you're an addict. And I said, you're a drug. And I said, screw you. I'm having a bad trip and I'm just going to go sleep this off. And it did not let me sleep, honestly, for days, not just that one night. And it was showing me all of these ways that I was showing up in my life that were not in integrity with how I wanted to show up. There was nothing wrong with how I was showing up. In fact, all of my addictions were and still are societally accepted addictions, including alcohol. And I was celebrated for them. I literally won awards. I knew it wasn't for me deep down, right? Higher self, right? If you are called to work with psychedelics, there is a part of your higher self that is coming online to intervene with what is happening. That was a rough night. I pray that was the worst night of my life, honestly, because it was in a lot of ways, and it wasn't in other ways, because I cut a deal with the medicine. I said, fine, I don't remember what the deal was. I won't do this thing, this one thing that it was calling me out on. Fine, I won't do that thing. I'll show you. And that's what I came out of the ceremony with, was, again, this really arrogant attitude of like, and honestly, arrogant and ignorant, because it was arrogant to think that I could stop all of my addictions all at once. And it was also ignorant because what I came out of the ceremony thinking and saying and acting on was, I'm not an addict if I'm not using, so I'm just going to stop everything. So I did. I stopped drinking. I had already stopped using cannabis, and I just kept up with that. I ended up leaving my job, which was probably the biggest source of my addiction. Just overworking was a big part of my life. And literally everything that was bringing me joy, looking back on it, I think I took on this Puritan, have no fun, have no delight or pleasure attitude. Honestly, here's the thing that I know about addiction now, all these years later, is that addiction, it's if you're childhood trauma, your childhood stuff. For me, it was childhood. It could be anything. If you're holding on to something that is, okay, what is trauma? Something that is too much, too fast, too soon. So if you're holding on to something that is causing angst, addiction is the lid on whatever that is, right? And I had a lot of undealt with stuff. I'm an immigrant in this country. My immigrant experience was fine, but also not. My experience growing up as an immigrant was fine, but also not. There was just a lot of things that I was not acknowledging, that I was not being honest about. I was living with what I now lovingly call "it's fine" syndrome. Oh, this really terrible thing happened, but it's fine. Oh, I'm not really totally happy, but it's fine. Who is? And yeah, I was just living in "it's fine" syndrome. And when I stopped using all of my addictions pretty much all at once, because I ended up leaving my job about 6 months after that ceremony, I unraveled. The lid came off, and all of my demons, all of my insecurities, all of the things that I had never dealt with, trauma, too much, too fast, too soon, it gets stored away. So all the stuff that had been too much, too fast, too soon came out of that treasure chest and just what became my everyday life for a while. That was rough. And I'm grateful that I already knew about the subconscious mind, that I already knew how to work with the subconscious mind, that I already had sort of a Rolodex of colleagues that I could turn to who also knew about the subconscious mind. And that is what I did. So I came out of the ceremony. I think I promised the medicine that I wouldn't drink for 2 weeks. And I think by the time 2 weeks was up, I was back in New York, and it was the holidays, and there was holiday parties and all of this stuff. And I was like, oh, I don't know why. It just doesn't feel right. And that's something that is really common with psychedelic medicine, is that the things that we previously needed to think about, the things that we previously would use our cognitive lens for, we get this visceral, this somatic, this body, this lived experience of oh, this is it, you just know it to be true. There's no questioning it. In the past, oh, can I quit alcohol? Can I not quit alcohol? Is this right? Is this wrong? It just didn't click in. But with psychedelic medicine, I was like, oh, this is absolutely the truth. And I know it. I live it. I feel it. I breathe it. And that's what happened. I came back. There was 2 weeks. I fulfilled those 2 weeks, but I still didn't feel quite right coming back to alcohol. And as luck would have it, that was 2018. Ruby Warrington, who is an amazing author, she runs a publication house called The Numinous. And at the time she was pre-releasing the book Sober Curious. And I had already been following her. I actually pre-ordered the book, and it came with a 90-day, start 2019 with a 90-day no alcohol, cleanse, mission, journey. And I got really excited because I'd never done 90 days. The longest I'd done 30 a bunch of times, but I think 45 maybe was the longest, and 90 felt like a stretch, and I wanted to stretch myself. So I did the 90 days, and that took me into almost April, or right around April. And then I thought, okay, can I go to my birthday? My birthday is at the end of May. Can I celebrate a birthday without alcohol? Which, again, if you were at my 30th birthday in South Brooklyn taking shots of vodka indiscriminately, then that was a stretch for me to spend a birthday without alcohol. So I thought, okay, can I do that? And so then I did. And then after that took me to June. And then I thought, okay, can I go a year without alcohol? And then I did. And then it became easier. When the call to drink came up, I took it as a sign of oh, there's something that I'm not coping with. And my subconscious is bringing up an old coping mechanism, because by then I had really started leaning on other coping mechanisms that I had prayed to lean on previously, but wasn't able to until psychedelics came in and just rearranged everything for me in the best way. And again, it left me so confused for years. I was left thinking, what happened that week? That weekend, what happened in that weekend that I couldn't make happen in 2 years of trying? For 2 years, I'd been trying to distance myself from alcohol, and I couldn't. What happened that weekend that literally has never brought me back to alcohol? I'm celebrating 6 years this week, and I have not drank alcohol. I've not had a full drink of alcohol. When a friend passed, I had a sip of champagne. I've had sips of things out of respect in that way in my culture and in my Russian heritage culture. Alcohol is a sign of respect in that way. So I've had sips of alcohol as an expression of respect. But other than that, I've not had a full drink of alcohol. I don't, by the way, necessarily believe in the abstinence model of addiction recovery, which is the AA model, which says if I was following that model and then I did have a sip or I did have a drink, then the time resets, right? My 6 years would reset. And I think that is unkind to the process, truly. So I don't subscribe to the abstinence model of addiction. I'm abstinent from alcohol, mostly because of that mental load of, okay, if I drink it, then when do I drink it? How much do I drink it? And it's easier to just rule it out of my life as something that I don't do, rather than to spend all of this time reestablishing a relationship with it when I don't actually really care about it. Alcohol became really predictable for me. So it's like, I know what's going to happen when I drink alcohol. I've been drinking it since I was like 7 or 8 years old because that's really common in Russian culture. So there's no mystery there. Whereas, I go into a meditation or I go into a yoga class, I don't know what's going to come up, and I like the mystery. So yeah, my whole life changed that weekend. I was left wondering what the heck happened. And the answer is integration. The answer is that when I made that promise, I then made another promise. So I made the promise to not do it for 2 weeks. And then I made another promise to not do it for 90 days. And then I made another promise to not do it for another, 45 days. And then I made a promise to go a whole year. And every year or every day, whatever, I recommit to that promise. I'm not interested in returning to an alcohol lifestyle. And it's the integration that makes the difference. I would have loved a little preparation. I would have loved for someone to tell me, hey, your life's about to change. Can you wrap your head around that? Because I couldn't, even though that's what I had been praying for and that's what I came to the medicine for. I couldn't imagine what would happen. And it was funny too, because I left my job. I went back to the medicine after I left my job. So it was like 6 months later, I'm back in the medicine journey. And I was like, I wanted a different life. And all I did was stop drinking alcohol. And then I just sat there for a moment. I was like, I'm a different person. I'm not hanging out in bars. I'm not revolving my life around alcohol. Like, I'm actually a different person, but in such a different way than I expected. I don't know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting for like unicorns and rainbows to come and take me off into a bright future. But what I got was, a one-way ticket to the basement of my subconscious mind, which I wouldn't change for the world. Sitting on this side of it, I really, truly would not change it for the world. But yeah, I feel like that's just the beginning of the story. And it is why I do this work. It's why I turned my hypnotherapy practice into a psychedelic preparation and integration practice to help people prepare for their lives changing, to understand that their lives are going to change, and then to also integrate that change, integrate the insights, actually have, the life transformation that psychedelics offer. Because I'll say it once and I'll say it at least a million more times. If you want psychedelics to transform your life, you want them to transform your subconscious mind. And that is what I'm here to facilitate and help with. Yeah, I mean, the best place to start, honestly, is the workshop that I'm leading on Monday, November 18th. I teach about what the subconscious mind is, the language of the subconscious mind, and you get your own subliminal recording, whether you use that for a psychedelic ceremony or just going to sleep. It's going to help you out. It's going to help you big time. I've been using them and I'm noticing big shifts. Thanks for listening to my story, my vulnerable, raw, unscripted story that I've been wanting to share for a while. I welcome questions. I welcome follow-ups to the story, because again, this is just the beginning of the story, the Cliff Notes version. And thanks for being here on Ketamine Connections. I'm Anna Krishtal. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Ketamine Connections. I hope you found our discussion insightful and empowering. Remember that understanding the subconscious mind and how to make the most of ketamine therapy can truly transform someone's healing journey. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share it with your friends and family and anyone who might benefit from this information. So few people considering ketamine therapy are fully educated about its potential and the impact that it has on the subconscious mind. Your share could be the key element to their transformation. Don't forget to subscribe to Ketamine Connections so that you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, I absolutely adore reading your reviews. So your feedback really helps me feel like this is an engaging exercise. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm talking into empty internet space. So your review really helps light me up and also helps me reach more audience. So I would appreciate one if you're willing. And please use the link below to submit any questions or topics that you would like covered. I cannot wait to hear from you and to co-create this journey together. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the possibilities that are available in this moment right here, right now. Thanks so much. See you next time on Ketamine Connections.